Good morning, and welcome to our Poetry and Organ Advent series. It's good to see everyone here, and it's good to have you join us over the internet as well. It is our last concert in this Advent season. Next is Christmas Eve, and we hope that you join us on Christmas Eve at one of our many services. Today is very special. We have Georgia in the house, and I'm just going to remind you, put everything that is on your plate, everything that keeps you up at night, everything that you worry about goes away at this time. Be present and here in this moment, be in this moment for music and for the spoken word. I'm so happy that you joined us. I'm going to introduce Sean Sexton, who will introduce our poet today. Sean Sexton.
Okay. Only sadly do I acknowledge that this is the end. This is the last one. It seemed like it was so hard to get to the point of having them, and now we're down to the wire, down to the last. And we have, backed by popular demand, we heard you beating on the gates, Gordon, Gordon, wanting him to come back. We left so much undone, unsaid, unspoken. He's going to get the rest of it done today. Gordon Johnston. He's a professor at Mercer University. He has written 2 chapbooks, Durable Goods and Gravity's Light Grip, and co-authored. He's a kayaker, and he's very much really involved in the natural world and rivers in particular. And he has co-authored a guide to the Ocmulgee Mounds National Historical Park and published poems and prose in the Georgia Review, the Southern Poetry Review, and other distinguished journals of the South. And he writes clay pages, poems wood-fired onto stoneware by Roger Jameson, who's somebody that we actually know. We have some local people who have been connected with that clay program directly. He's in Athens, I think. Is that correct? Oh, okay, Julie. But anyway, his new book that I didn't mention because the blurb's on the back of it is Scaring the Bears, which is a full poetry volume published by Mercer University, Mercer Press. And so Gordon, come up and weave your tales and your magic. I forgot one thing. Do not fail. They're up there in the front to pick up one of these guides to our cultural programs going on in the church. They're going to go far beyond this day, but they mention this as well. Thank you again, Gordon.
Thanks. Sean, thanks for that introduction. Thank you all for having me back. I've only been here once, but it sort of feels like home. It's great to have a receptive audience. And thank you, Andrew, in advance. I'll try to keep my mind on the poetry. It's really hard. You read a poem and then you hear Andrew's musical interpretation of it and puts you in another place. And then you have to reel yourself back down to earth and read another one. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, and the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. So I hope my words will be up to that Word. Most of these poems I've got to finish the story, like Sean said in the introduction. Get it all done. Most of these will be new to you guys, but I'm going to start with one I read last year because it's a poem about prayer, and it just seems appropriate to kick things off. The name of the poem is "Household God," and it's about prayer, but it's not about prayer in the conventional way. I think there are many things, there are many human acts that count as prayer that we often don't acknowledge as prayer. Not all prayer has words, Household God. There's an ear there as you make the bed that will hear what you can't say. An eye that reads the sign language of your hand, tucking the quilt, plumping from the pillow the shape of a beloved sleeper's head. When you pinch a bloom off an impatiens in the hope of another blossom, some small angel hearkens to the gratitude, however brief. The deity watches the washing of the dog, savors the cold, clean incense of sudsy fur, then the hem of her shaking dry and rolling in grass, joyous to ruin your work. The Almighty asks to lie beside you under the warm Ford, watching the black pour of 40-weight oil that has anointed your wife's comings and goings and delivered your daughter to school. The God of plungering the clog, of washing windows and priming the sump and packing the lunch, the I am of sorting spice jars and ironing, the ping of each pea shelled into this pan is a rosary bead, a ritual with no words, a grace of work, a psalm sound. You think you are the giver, the owner, then you hear the only life there is listening to you listen. Both you and God feel found. There is only holy ground. Thank you, Andrew. All right, this next poem I'll read is, Advent is the season of nativity. We think of birth. We think of the birth story. We think of journeys. A lot of these poems I read have something to do with a journey. The journey of fatherhood has been defining for me, and interesting, and humbling, and frustrating, and funny. So the title of this next poem is Two-Hand Touch. It's a reference to football, right? A two-hand touch football that you play. There's a moment in fatherhood. You spend all these years letting the kid win, at every game you play and that sort of thing. And then there comes the day when the kid can't lose. You put your best effort out there. And this is kind of about that moment. And partly reading it because the circumstance that gave rise to the poem was the same old touch football game that I played with my boys Thanksgiving week a few years ago. One of my boys was no longer a boy, So, but there's a reference in it to a little mishap that I had. It's about my mortality and just about the joys of being a father too. So maybe that's enough to say. Two-hand touch. 2 steps from the sideline, my 17-year-old son cuts up field so that my lunge to touch tackle him turns midair to a slow-motion dive past the grass toward the cement sidewalk edging it. I descend as if this second had 70 increments, every one as distinct and ball-peen hammered by disaster as the shards of a crashed, dredged, repieced Boeing. Frame by frame, I both watch and film my own fall. My boy's quick pivot is not in the picture, but my heart so crows his grace that his juke is the bright bulb behind the whole reel, limning each sand grain, each carat of quartz on the concrete plane I'm on final approach to. My pink palms chalked down like landing gear, blinking chinks of green glass, catching light between them in the eon preceding the skid of my hand heel's skin against pavement, and my yaw and roll onto elbow, knee, and shoulder. My outer self will shred, white cheddar on a grater. Some socketed bone will unseat, my hide constellate with red dwarf suns of blood. I can't see my boy for the ground, but I know in my long father's fall he runs on. Every wound my body blooms will shout, "Go, go!" Wow. It's gorgeous, Andrew. So this next poem is about it's about a relationship with a neighbor. You know, I love those passages in Isaiah. The lion will lie down with the lamb. You know, the prophecies of the Messiah. The little babe shall play on the hill of the adder, you know, and not be stung. Isn't that beautiful to think about? And isn't that as far as we are in America? As far as possible from where we are now in America. There's so much polarization about everything, political, you know, and otherwise. And yeah, pray for peace. This year at my church, I'm the preacher's wife, so I don't usually get to do to light the Advent candle, but this year I got to light the candle of peace. So this poem kind of wishes for peace, I think, and it comes from a circumstance where my neighbor, I saw my neighbor, you know, working on, whom I don't always get along with, working on hanging his refilled bird feeder. So kind of have that in your head as you listen to it. Hummingbirders. The neighbor hangs one feeder only since 2004. An hourglass, he quakingly climbs a step stool to hook to a chain in easy eyeshot of his porch swing. And when this morning I see him see me as he stumbles going up, it seems I ought to help, though our yard signs at election time have always kept our conversations brief. We're both sure we know each other's mind. In the years of silence, his wife has greeted my kids by name. We've loaned tools and sugar, been polite, almost kind. These needy miniature buzz bomb hummers are a beauty we have in common. In their sip and zither, their sign of the cross before the plastic blooms, our reverence aligns. How many summers can he feed the birds I watch for free? So I go up his steps. He holds the grail of nectar out. We'll feed them together. I hang it, saying the kids love their green glitter and the thrum of their flight. Hell, he says, I just like to watch them fight. Wish you guys could see his face. I'm the only one who gets to see his face as he's playing. It's quite a treat, you know. He actually opened his eyes on that one. All right, this next poem, this time of year too, I think we think of, I don't know if people think the same things I do, but I think about borders. I think of the Holy Family. Man, the worst place in the world to have your first baby, right? Away from your mother, away from your aunts, away from the extended Jewish female family that would usually be there. We think of the birth story as beautiful and peaceful. It was a horror story, for Mary. All those borders she and Joseph crossed, and then even after the birth, the flight to Egypt. And, we're always, it's just human nature, right? We set up these borders and then we defend them. We militarize them. We should do better, right? But anyway, I'm interested in the idea of borders and the kind of lines that we're always imposing on a landscape that really resists those lines. Rivers as borders, boundaries between states and countries and that sort of thing. And the way that sets up these little boxes in our heads, and those boxes that separate things that ought to stay whole, that ought not to be separated. So that was kind of in the back of my mind as I was drafting this poem. It's called Border Waters. Most of my life I bridged them, let the rise of concrete, steel, or wood in the road carry me over to the other county, state, or country, which I've shot through, bullet piercing a paper target. There was pleasure in passing over a line, making progress toward a place I needed to be with minimal resistance from the miles between. How much of being human is making up lines, setting edges and borders, just so you can cross them? I'm still a fired slug, but losses have slowed me some. Now I look when I come to crossings, upstream and down, knowing the border, the dead penciled there, but seeing the real river too, never still, where folks fish and drown. Welcome to South Carolina, a road sign on the savannah says. Seeing it as a boy, I felt far gone from home, out of bounds. I mistook an imaginary line set by some king for the reason the river was there, believed that under the water the map's black ink was etched into the karst and fossil coral and sands milled from stone over 1 billion years, as if watersheds like the kid me were obedient. One good flood, one broken bridge, one trip on foot or horseback, one paddled boat, and up we grow. Every straightness and solidity blurs and melts as the river goes easily where it wants to go. A current of rock, forest, storm, and earth that shifts but never slows, that breaks its own banks, dissolving and coming to carry everything, me included, within its motion. Welcome, South Carolina, to being a single salt grain in a vast ocean. Thanks, Andrew. Well, there was a river running through that one. Did you hear it? Wow, man, I wish I could do that. I wish I could do that. I was thinking Walter Pater said, all art aspires to the condition of music. I really get it. I get that. All right, so Advent, there shall come a shoot from the stump of Jesse. This huge old stump, dead for years, grayed, and this green shoot coming up. That's the prophetic language for birth of Christ. I am not such a shoot. But hanging with Sean, I love Sean. He's one of my favorite new friends. I call him a new friend because we've known each other about 2.5 years, I think. But coming back to his place and seeing his cows, his land, and sensing that long-term rooted connection he has to it, it's really beautiful. And these days we're pretty ephemeral as people. We move around. We go from place to place. We have to. There's no sin in that, right? But we're not stumps rooted with shoots coming off. But there are little ways that we can kind of stay in our lineage in a way, This next poem is kind of about that. I'm sort of stuck on old things. I'm not an antiquer, but I have a trace chain that my grandfather blacksmithed himself. It's a beautiful old rusty chain. My grandfather was an incredibly competent man. He wasn't a blacksmith, but he could do all these different things by virtue of the fact that he grew up on a farm, lived on a farm. Even though in his adult life he worked in a bleachery, he never got the farmer out of him. He had a milk cow in the city of Rock Hill, got in trouble with the law for having a milk cow in the city limits. But I've got a few things of my grandfather's. And one of them is his razor. I had this old safety razor. You crank it open. It has these chrome jaws. And you put an actual razor blade in there, crank it shut, and then you slice your face to ribbons until you learn to use it anyway. But this is about one of those small old things, older than you. You keep them. You can't keep the person, right? We can't keep that beautiful piece that Andrew just played. We can't keep all the people in the world we want to stay in the world, but we can keep those little things that make them present to us. His pawpaw's razor. Every dawn, as I cut myself back with it, rinsing away a grit of pelt to preserve my mask of boy, I have to shave slowly lest I nick my lip, my cheek mole, the dells that edge my Adam's apple. The blade, as long as my thumb, thin as a page of Galatians, drawn down my face like a shade, makes a ripping gliss in the cranked shut chrome jaws. I angle the edge along the facets of my face, then up my overhang of chin, where I must bear down a bit, and my wrist wide awake to roughs and rises. The least blade snag will mean an hour of bleeding. I am both the field and the mower, like my grandfather on his father's 40 acres. Tiller, seed sower, this farm, the ground he grew from. I can see the geography of his jaw, his hands easing an axe to the grindstone he let the boy me turn. I hear the word hone as I twist the razor's handle to free, rinse, and dry the blade. The stone, white and pitted as old bone, rasped a silver bevel onto the blade. How I wanted to own that stone, to keep and keen an edge every day. This was the secret to being grown. just love that last sustained note. Okay, so I'll do two more. I think we're getting close to time here, I think. It is hard to keep my head in the poems. Listening. Usually when you're a poet giving one of these readings, Sean can testify to this. If the poetry reading is a carnival, you're the ride, which is cool. Not here, right? I'm the ticket taker. I sort of open the gate, and there's the tilt-a-whirl over there, Momo the monster over there. But this takes the pressure off. It's really nice. So I'm going to read two more. This next one a little longer, and then I'll kind of wrap up with a short one. But this next one is called Material. And this was a response to, I teach poetry writing, fiction writing. I often give my students the assignment. I walk into the room and I chalk up, I dry erase marker up on the board a word, and I say, I want a sonnet in 10 minutes. And they freak out and call me the poetry Nazi. And then they write these beautiful, unbelievable pieces because they don't have any time to outguess themselves, right? To second guess everything they put on the page. This improvisational art, like we're hearing from Andrew today, it's a really beautiful thing, And one day when I did that, I walked into the room, I had my word ready, and another student had already written a word on the board, and they were writing. And I sat down and wrote with them. So the word was material. Okay, and so I wrote this fairly quickly, but the form of the poem ended up like a dictionary entry. You know how you look up a word in the dictionary and you see numbered meanings? Here's the meaning of this word as an adjective. Here's the meaning of this word as a noun. They're numbered, etc. So that was the form that the poem decided to take. I didn't really choose it. I didn't have time, and it's very associative. A couple of things you might need to know in advance. Fern Hill is this really great poem by Dylan Thomas that I hated the first time I read it, and then an English professor made me write a paper about it, and then it felt like the poem was about me, and I loved it from then on. There's also a reference to this person largely forgotten by popular culture, Madonna. Anybody remember Madonna? And a song she was well known for about the material world. Okay, well, that's it. And also one other, people don't sew anymore. You guys, maybe y'all remember, my mom, when I was a kid, she had these elaborate patterns that she would lay out, and she would cut cloth, and she would sew clothes. I don't know if anybody does that anymore, but I used to love watching my mother do that. I hated going to the material store, where she would shop for the fabric, but I loved her sewing. All those things mixed in here. So the title of this is Material. 1, cloth my mother bought by the yard, cut into shapes using patterns thin as Bible pages, then ran them through her singer, her fingers framing a plunging needle. The halo of light hid her face. Dresses for my sisters came of it, and once a red chambray shirt, beautiful, simple, itchy except at its open collar, sewed only for me. 2, an adjective I learned in college when Dr. Wingard scribbled in red that my description of my mother's father's farm was not material to the meaning of whinnying stable in Fern Hill. I meant Dylan Thomas was a man grown out of a boy cut out of a farm that was almost his, as I was, and hadn't known before the poem read me in a pool of light as my roommates slept. My prof had a point. Freshmen think they are material to everything. They are. 3, an adjective in an old Madonna song for the one world worth living in. Also for the girl who sings it, the persona, if you count the song as a poem, which it isn't, though like Fern Hill, it wishes for freedom and substantiation through things, the Sabbath in the pebble of the holy stream, or bling. 4, my soul, subtracted from the subjects that choose me, cut from my thin paper, like breath subtracted from song. These words make a shape I call mine. This pencil stitches out a solitude that lets others almost enter, wear the red chambray that my mother pieced, young, A song is not a shirt, a pebble, a scribbled page. A song is not material. A song is sung. Thank you, Andrew. And thank everyone for listening, too. I'm going to wrap up with this last poem. It is a great pleasure to be here and have a receptive audience. You know, you scribble these poems. I get up in the morning, in the dark, and do my writing before everybody else in my house is up. That way I don't miss out on being fully there when everybody else in my house is up. But it's wonderful, but it's solitary. Solitary in a good way, but you sort of want to come out of that private space into something more. Public is not the word. Congregational is the word. I think it's wonderful that Sean organizes these reading series because poetry needs a congregation. The way a church is a congregation, and it's really nice to be part of that congregation today. So thanks, Sean. Thanks, Andrew. I'm going to end with a shorter poem. The title of the poem is Lent, because I think it's important for us. In all the joy and the gift giving of Advent, we have to remember Lent is coming, right? We have to remember that all of the glories of the birth that we associate with Christmas, it's all prelude to resurrection, right? So the poem's titled Lent, and it's about that season that you all know well. But it's also less about the churchy rituals surrounding that season than about the way, for me in Georgia where I live, Lent always kind of coincides with the blooming of the first daffodils, and the world kind of beginning to remember itself and coming back from that grayness of winter that you here in this part of Florida know nothing about, right? Or not much about. Lent. Some, come Lent, give up things unknowingly. Daffodils, for one, each March the low lemon trumpets blow their color out of the clammy ground, dotting the bounds of houses that are gone now. Each bloom an ember of memory, honoring the shape of a fallen shack. Every year, this yellow surprises me, returning in plenty, precious, saying, they're not the first, and you're not the first, glad and quiet, drawing up from the dirt the old salts, the black goodness of the gone, making petals of it.